All right, get your attention back. We have one more to cover, and we do it this way because we want to spend just a few more minutes on the last one. The reason why is it's so new to so many of us. In fact, I want to tell you that it was new to me just a few years ago. If there was anything that I would say, I would have loved to know about this practice, this thing, when I was a young dad, it's this particular technique. This one you're going to love, and you're going to want to run right out, and many of you, and practice it with your grandkids right away. And that is the idea of a blessing. Now, let me share some thoughts about blessing, and then we're going to practice it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But here's what I think. I think that blessing is the exact opposite of prayer. It's kind of like the mirror image of prayer, because prayer is communicating to God on behalf of myself or others, or at least intercessory prayer is that, communicating to God on the behalf of people. But a blessing is communicating to people on behalf of God. So when you pray, you speak for others or for yourself to God. When you bless, you speak to others on behalf of God. Did I say that right? Come across right? Yeah. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. And the most common blessing that is used, and many of you have heard this at the end of services at your church and other places like that, but we looked at earlier in the series, it's Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. And in fact, what I'd like to ask you to do is I'd like to ask you to read it with me. We're going to actually memorize this a little bit. In a little bit, we're going to do that, work on memorizing a little bit, and then we're going to practice it. But I want to tell you before we do that blessings can actually take several forms. One of the forms that it can take is the idea of reciting scripture that is a blessing like this one over your grandkids. And there's this one, but there are also many, many other passages in scripture that make wonderful blessings where you can just speak them to your grandchildren in the ways that you can. Another way you can do a blessing is to take whatever prayer you would make for your grandkids, and instead of addressing the prayer to God, you address the blessing to them. For example, what I just said in the last part about if your grandkids say, would you pray that I get an A on the test on Friday? You say, well, how about if I pray that you have enough self-discipline to study hard? So you could pray that to God. God, help Tori to have enough self-discipline to study hard, to get the A on her test on Friday. Instead, here's how you can do the blessing. You can say, Tori, may the Lord give you enough self-discipline that you can study hard enough to earn the A on the test on Friday. So you're speaking the same words. Instead of saying, dear Jesus, you say, may the Lord, and instead of addressing it to God, you address it to her, and that also becomes a blessing. A third way to do it is a customized blessing, to be able to do it that way. A customized blessing is one that is more involved. It takes time on your part to write it out, and you're going to write out some positive things about your grandchildren. In fact, there's an incredible book on on giving a blessing that grandparents ought to use. It's called The Blessing by John Trent and Gary Smalley, and it's a big book. It's just full of incredible ideas. It's a bestseller, been around a number of years, and it hasn't lost its effectiveness at all. It's an amazing book to help you with the idea of a custom blessing, and that's really, really good. Let me tell you how we do the blessing in our family. I have grandkids all the way from 3 to 23, and so we don't do it the same with the 3-year-old as we do it with the 23-year-old, obviously. But the 3-year-old comes over to our house on a regular basis, several times a week, and he's there after preschool for a nap. And so Diane and I have decided that the way that we're going to do this with Micah, the little one that got sent to the principal's office on the second day of preschool, how we do it with Micah each week, or each day. And so this little guy that is such a bundle of energy and can't stand still for hardly anything, something happens to him when it's time for a nap. That's when we've decided to do it. So Grandma will say, Micah, it's time for your nap. And it's a normal wailing, no, I don't want to take a nap, and he starts all that way. And then and she just doesn't say anything back to that. She just says, would you like Grandpa to give you a blessing? And immediately he goes, uh-huh. And this little guy that won't stand still, something happens, and he'll come over to me, and he'll stand in front of me, and he puts his hands down to his side, and his body relaxes, and he stands still. I don't know what happens, but something happens inside of this little guy. He loves the blessing. And he comes over and he stands still. And I put my hands on him, on his head, and I look him in the eye, and he looks back at me. I give him a great big smile, and I say, Micah, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now go take your nap. And you know what? He has never fussed about taking his nap after I give him the blessing. I don't know what it is. It's almost miraculous. But that little guy then goes up and he takes his nap. He loves that blessing. He doesn't call it a blessing. He calls it Grandpa giving him peace. And if I forget, he said, Grandpa, will you give me peace? And the other day, he just a couple weeks ago, he said, Grandpa, what's peace? I'll try explaining that to a 3-year-old, you know. And a couple days later, it's, Grandpa, what's a countenance? And he's asking all these questions just at 3 years old. But it's been an incredible ritual that we do that he loves, just loves, loves, loves. Now, obviously, when you have a 23-year-old, you're not going to do it the same, but maybe you do the custom blessing at birthdays and special occasions, and you do it like that. But the blessing is a powerful, powerful tool in the hand of a grandparent to bring favor. Remember, that's what a blessing is. A blessing means favor. Bring favor on your grandchildren. Who better than the spiritual matriarch or patriarch in a family to pronounce God's favor on the family line to follow? And I'll tell you something. If some of you have some kids that are cool to spiritual things, they still will think this is a cool thing to have you pronounce a blessing over the grandkids. This is a great tool. So let's learn how to do it. We're going to recite it together. I want you to recite it out loud with me 3 times. Look at the screen. If you want, let's say it together, okay? The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's say it again. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. One more time. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to practice right now. I'm going to ask you to divide up into twos. Do this with somebody other than your spouse. Find somebody else. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to bless them, and then they're going to bless you back, okay? Here's how you do it. You put your hands on them, appropriately, of course. Don't mess up hairdos and stuff like that, but you can do shoulders or head or whatever, but you put your hands on them. You got to look each other in the eye. I want to tell you, that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part. Look each other in the eye. But then one person says this. You can look at the screen and be reminded of what it says. You can cheat a little bit that way if you want to. Look at the screen and do the blessing. And then when you've done it, then you switch roles and the other person does a blessing back to you, okay? So we're going to practice this. And I think even in doing this, if you haven't ever done this before, you're going to sense the power of this particular activity. It's a great practice of Christian grandparents, and we want you to walk out of here equipped to do that. Okay, so stand up, pair up, find somebody that's not your spouse, and let's practice this together, okay? All right, thanks so much for participating in that. How was that? Was that good? Yeah, boy, we saw some emotion in there. We saw some real feeling. Isn't it amazing that this simple little exercise brings out so much of us? And it's just a wonderful thing. I just believe there's a special spiritual power in doing the blessing. And I want you to add it to your bag of tricks, I guess I could say, your arsenal as a Christian grandparent, that this is something, and you're going to love doing it. I want to end with a story in this session that has to do with the blessing. A number of months ago, I taught this at a church there in Southern California where we live. And I taught it on a Sunday morning during an adult class. The church had the traditional adult class set up. And we actually spent a whole period talking about this blessing and going through it. But I had them do a lot what I've asked you to do, of learning the Levitical blessing and memorizing it. And then I had them practice on each other. But I had planned with the children's pastor to do more than that. They had children's church going on at the same time as this adult class. So I said, let's bring some kids in. Let's let the grandparents practice on some kids. So after they finished, just like you finished, in came the children's pastor with a whole bunch of kids. We had counted so that we had enough for 2 or 3 kids per table. And we said, okay, we're going to divide you up and have you go to tables, and we're going to do this. Well, he tells me as he's coming in and we're moving the kids around, he says, Larry, I got a problem. There's a bunch of really upset kids back in children's church because they all wanted to be blessed by grandparents. And but we divided them up, had them go around to the tables, and we had the grandparents take turns and bless these kids. And after we were done, we got them off on the side of the room. We asked the kids, so what'd you think? And kids are going thumbs up. They thought it's a good thing. One little boy went like this. And he said, I really liked it because I don't have a grandpa and grandma. And all the ladies, it was interesting. He had gone to a table of single grandmas. And they just got all teary. They had no idea that this little boy didn't have a grandma. And such a simple little thing would mean so much to him. Well, we had a plan, the children's pastor and I. It was really his plan, but the plan was that they wanted to institute something new in their church. And by the way, this is a great idea for your church to do as well. But his plan was that he would ask grandparents to come out of the service 5 minutes early. And they would beat the parents down to the children's wing, and they would stand in the door. And as the parents were coming to pick up the kids, the grandparents would ask the children in children's church, would you like to be blessed by a grandparent before you go out for the week? And they wanted to get grandparents involved in children's ministry. I thought that was a great idea. Isn't that a great idea? And so we were my job was to talk to the grandparents and begin to encourage them and get that kind of set up. And he took the kids back to the children's church. And we're in the middle of talking, and all of a sudden in he comes in again, the children's pastor. And this time he has a piece of paper in his hand. It was torn out of a notebook. And in big bold letters across the top of the notebook, it is written, we demand to be blessed by grandparents. And the kids had signed a petition. We didn't know they were so political. But they had signed a petition. They all wanted to be blessed by grandparents. You know, this extends beyond your own grandkids. There are kids in your church that have no grandparents. There are kids in your church that have no grandparents close. You know, maybe you become a surrogate grandparent, a church grandma, a church grandpa to a child that's here and their grandparents live in Miami or Seattle or somewhere else. You could be the local grandparent. Maybe somebody else can be a local grandparent to your grandkids that are in another place. You know, let's have a kingdom mindset. What if we become a grandparent influence in the lives of kids beyond just our own? We've talked all this time about our own family line and what we're going to do there, but you know, once you get the vision for that, God many times puts another child on your heart and say, be grandpa and grandma to this child as well. I want to tell you, if you keep this list in front of you, if you do these 8 things, it will aid you in becoming the intentional Christian grandparent that you'd like to be. I know you want to be one. So let's get at it. Let's get to work. Let's begin to practice this thing of being an intentional Christian grandparent. You ready? All right. Okay, one more session. And then we're all done. And the last one is a challenge to be intentional.